welcome to another edition of the Show Me Hoops podcast. My name's David Heap. I'm joined by, as usual, my baby brother Toby, as I like to call him, and the big dog, Matt Brucker. So, Matt, thanks for joining the program. Now, I'm pronouncing it right. It's Brucker. I know
Correct.
the K may be silent.
Correct.
Okay, so
No, you're good. You're good. It's no German name, so
gotcha.
Heavy on the German.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, we appreciate you joining us. And for those of you that follow the program or maybe don't know Matt, he is a Delta alum. He's from Delta. And now he's one of the big basketball guys in this part of the state, talks a lot of basketball, and somebody that we've got to know. And so we appreciate you joining us, Matt.
Oh, man, I'll tell you what. You call yourself the highest-rated podcast or whatever in Missouri. You was the first podcast I ever listened to, so there you go.
Well, there you see, making inroads all the time. All the time. And so before we get started here, Matt, tell the folks that don't know you a little bit. You know, you came from here at Delta. What got you so into basketball growing up here at Delta?
Well, I didn't play basketball in high school. I did my freshman year, and that was it. I gave it up because I didn't want to run every day in practice to watch the game from the end of the bench. And so I gave it up and actually became the mascot at Delta for 3 years. So bussing around to the games and stuff in those days, I graduated in the same class as Otto Porter. Obviously, everybody knows who he is. Got to see Scott County and those guys, 3-4 times a year, different ones. Not only that, but had the best seat in the house. I was right down there on the sideline and got to see a lot of good ball all those years. Went to college, started following SEMO up there during Dickie Nutt's tenure. And like I said, then I just started going to more games every chance I could.
And now you do the radio for Saxony Lutheran. I know you're heavily involved with the girls' SEMO Christmas tournament up there. And like you said, you're an avid SEMO supporter, men's and women's. And so
That's right. I covered Saxony girls for 4 seasons now, covered them, and did baseball last year for them. Waiting on baseball maybe this year, maybe not with the Rona. But anyways, I started doing that, started covering that girls tournament, more or less wall-to-wall online, and then calling the Saxony games, and did kind of the same thing with the boys' Christmas tournament up there this past year. And so it was one of them things that, it's good ball, and, I just like watching ball, whether it be, small school, big school, whatever, college, high school. Don't much care for the NBA, but that's just me. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I know, we follow each other on Twitter, and like you said, you may be at Leopold watching a game one night. You may be at Saxony watching a game one night. You're just out watching basketball all the time. And what got you and I talking about doing this podcast today, we were talking about, as you mentioned, you've covered Saxony Lutheran, Coach Sam Sides, been a long-time coach in the area, one of the, legendary coaches, especially on the girls' side. He's going to retire. That kind of got us talking about, on the boys' side, Danny Farmer also going to retire, which for a lot of people, they may not know this. Danny Farmer was also a girls' coach for several years at Scott County Central, and Danny actually won 5 state titles as the girls' coach at Scott County Central. And so, when you add up all his wins, I think he's got over 750 wins, and, he's had all these trips to the Final Four, all these state championships. I think it's like 16 or 17 trips to the Final Four and 17 state championships. So, not only is he one of the legendary coaches from this part of the state, but I would say in the state of Missouri, period, with his career. So
yeah, no doubt about that. And, it's funny, I've only known him at Charleston as the boys coach. From my remembrance, that's all I've known him as. And I didn't know he was a girls coach at Scott County until they started talking about whenever he retired. And it's kind of funny, I just didn't picture him anywhere but Charleston.
Yeah, Coach Farmer was I grew up at Scott County, and he was our girls coach. He was the elementary PE teacher. And back in those days, the junior high boys would scrimmage against the high school girls for, every year. And so Coach Farmer would actually practice us growing up until we got out of 8th grade, got out of junior high, and then we went to play for Coach Cookson. And I say to this day, and I tell Coach Farmer this all the time, Coach Farmer's practices were the toughest practices I ever went through in my life. I mean, nothing against Coach Cookson. His were also tough. But with Coach Farmer, we would start every practice. We'd do our layups. We'd kind of warm up. Then we'd go out and we'd scrimmage. And, I mean, you'd scrimmage like 6 or 8 quarters. And every quarter, the losers had to run for every point you lost by.
Good
and then
night.
at the end of practice, we would you had to run 5 double killers and 5 down and back sprints. And everybody on the team has got to make every one of them or they don't count. And so at the end of that practice, you had done so much running. And I could sit here and list off player after player, all state players, good players, that Coach Farmer would say, nope, we're running that one again. It didn't matter who it was. And and my 8th grade year was 1992. The girls basketball team was 28-0, Scott Central, and they beat us for about the first week of practice, and we got tired of, getting beat. And, I mean, people say, girls beating boys, but you got to think these are the undefeated state champs. They were unbelievable and a really, really good team. But after about a week of that, we got tired of losing, and so I always make the joke. They were 28-0, but they were about, 5-82 in practice that year. And so we got tired of getting beat. But we were talking about these coaches and them retiring and, losing 2 good ones. But also, just kind of looking at, I think that we're very spoiled here in Southeast Missouri when you look at the coaches that we've had come through here. Talking about a Coach Farmer, and I mentioned Ronnie Cookson, another guy that Coach Farmer played for, Lennis McFerrin. Then you've got Jim Bidwell down there at Portersville, for years and years. Great coach, won 5 state championships down there. And then Paul Hale. Paul Hale, we could have a whole podcast about Paul Hale and the great career that he had. Not only did he go to the Final Four 3 or 4 times, win a state championship, but if not for some of the best teams that's ever come out of here, he would have went, he got stopped by the great Portersville teams that Jim Bidwell had. I mean, 33-0, didn't lose a game, and that's the only losses that Paul Hale had that year. Or he got beat by the Derek Tipler teams at New Madrid that were, some of the best teams we've ever seen come out of this part of the state. Got beat by some of those good teams Greg Hollifield had at Sykeston that were undefeated, some of the better teams we've seen in recent memory. So Paul Hale, another one, like I said, you could have a whole podcast on how good a coach he is. But my point is, we are very spoiled in this area to think about these coaches and how good they were. And I can tell you from having been in other parts of the state, this is not the norm to have coaches of this level.
No, I mean, people talk all the time about the Southeast Missouri area basketball and why it is so good. And you mentioned it to me before we went on. It starts with coaching. And another guy you didn't mention here, and I don't know what his overall record or what he did elsewise was, but a guy that I remember that coached my cousins at Delta growing up was Randy White on the girls' side.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that had a lot of success, at least, while I can remember. When my cousins, the Cook family, was going through Delta, went to the Final Four once or twice and watched them play up there. It's just you don't catch lightning in a bottle, I guess you'd say, with coaching like that just anywhere.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Coach White, he's a good friend of mine, and he actually made 3 trips to the Final Four. Like you said, they won 12 district championships in a row and just had an amazing run here at Delta. I'm superintendent there, and I walk up and down the hall and walk by those plaques all the time, and we're trying to add to those, as we go along here. But yeah, he was a great coach on the girls' side, and then we're just spoiled to the coaches that we've had. And Toby, you and I were talking about this, as we're looking at the coaching scene and how much it's changed in the last, even the last 5 years with some of the personal trainers that are out there. Now that it's a whole industry with these personal trainers, and a guy who we both know, Fred Garman, down there in Kennett. Fred's one of these trainers who Fred started out, he was going to be a high school coach. Yeah. And then he enjoys the personal training. I know Fred, and he does a good job at that. But also, there's more money to be made than that. Head coaching stipend in Southeast Missouri, depending on where you're at, $3,000 or $4,000 to be the coach, and all the flack and everything else. And I always make the joke, those personal trainers are undefeated.
They're undefeated, and they also get to, if you're a personal trainer, you're working with 1 or 2 or small groups of kids, and it's kids that want to be there because their parents aren't going to pay the money to be trained and spend the time, late at night or early in the morning or on the weekends whenever those sessions happen. So you're getting to be around kids that want to be there versus as a high school coach, it doesn't matter who your kids are. You've got some that, it's Tuesday, I don't really want to do this today, so it's going to be harder to get through to that kid. But with training, there's just less pressure with it, and it's probably more fun day to day than what we have to deal with.
Well, and there's no Misha handcuffs. Those trainers have no off season, no in season, out of season. You know, I've Kevin Garner at Misha, he's one of the guys up there that I really like. Kevin runs basketball for the state, and Kevin and I have talked about these things. And, you know, they're trying to make some changes because they see a loophole where you may have people from outside of the education system. They're not teachers. There's no background check, et cetera, for these people to come in and work with kids. Well, why is it wrong for teachers, people that went to school, this is their livelihood, this is their vocation? Why is it wrong for them to do it? And it's okay for some guy to come in who, you know, some of these people, I can tell you, they're not necessarily desirable to be around kids.
Right.
And so that's,
that's on top of that, it kind of, and not to turn this into a bash trainers thing, because that's not what this is, but it kind of shows, we can get back to this on why there aren't as many coaches around as, you know, if you're the coach that you got to deal with every day, but then you got this fun trainer on the side, well, then you may not want to listen to coach as much, so it makes it harder on your head coaches. You know, it's kind of like being the teacher in the class every day versus the substitute. Everybody loves a sub. But to be the one every day, you're not going to be loved every single day the same way a trainer is, because, you know, you got to be a little bit harder on your players and hold them to higher standards and expect a little bit more out of them than the trainer has to.
That's right, yeah. And so, you know, the training aspect of it, another good friend of mine is Corey Frazier up there in St. Louis. Corey and I go way back. Corey's one of the leading trainers in the nation. I mean, he's a high-profile guy. Corey actually got out of high school coaching there for just a minute, came back, you know, and now he's I think he's at John Burroughs now. But Corey, when he came back in, he actually did not take a teaching job at John Burroughs because he was making so much money training these kids on the side. And like you said, Toby, good for them. I mean, I want Corey to get all the money he can get. He's a Charleston guy.
It's a good opportunity for kids to play a little bit more too.
I
mean, to be taught. You know, I think
it's not. That's right. It's not hurting anybody. It's just the fact of the matter. We are losing some good coaches to that, and then on the other end, we're losing some good coaches to administration. You know, when you look at guys like a Kenyon Wright, who won 3 state titles and got into administration, and he's not coaching now, or Brad Botch, who's one of, you know, the best coaches in this part of the state down at Bernie, got into administration, and Aaron Bidwell, there's another one. And then guys like myself, like Joe Shoemaker.
I think that's a big one right there, is guys.
Brandon Blankenship, there are guys who are doing it like me now that do get to coach still, you know. But, I mean, the administration, I mean, the lure of, you know, more responsibility, more influence. You know, you can help more kids from where I'm at than I could when I was teaching PE. But then also the paycheck. I mean, just being honest, it's more money. And so, you know, we're losing coaches to both ends. And so having said that, Matt, you know, with the coaching landscape, Toby and I were saying this, you know, Coach McFerrin actually came back out of retirement. A guy like Fred Johnson came back out of retirement. We're seeing some of these older coaches come out of retirement. When you're looking at the coaching landscape now, and it can be girls or boys, either side or both, who are a couple of coaches in our area that maybe stand out to you that are doing a really good job that can maybe step into this void that's been created by our Hall of Famers retiring?
Well, you know, it was funny. I got to thinking about that, and from my standpoint, I was going to ask you all, who do you see, well, not necessarily who, but just a straight yes or no, are we going to have another Ronnie Cookson, another Danny Farmer, another, list them off, because Fred Johnson or any of them? I mean, people, as you said, there are leaving to administration in other ways. And I'm not going to say any of these people that I'm mentioning are going to turn into that legendary status, but people that are doing a great job where they're at with their talent, or, you know, lesser thereof, or sometimes more thereof. And stands out number one, I kept coming back to him, is Kirk Beller at Notre Dame. On the girls' side, takes over 2 seasons in and takes a team to a Final Four.